Hi, it's Dave from the RPG Rundown. I'm excited to tell you about a new Kickstarter from Columbia Games. It's for the hardback printing of the Azadmere sourcebook, which is part of the venerable HârnWorld campaign setting. But what is Azadmere? And for that matter, what is HârnWorld? We'll answer those questions and more as we delve into this richly detailed world and into Azadmere specifically. First, I'll give you a quick overview of the things we'll cover, and then we'll go into each topic in more detail. Let's start with HârnWorld itself. It's a fictional setting for tabletop role-playing games, a bit like D&D settings you might know, such as the Forgotten Realms or Dragonlance. But the goals for Harn are a little different from more mainstream settings, and the setting itself is designed to be used with any role-playing system. HârnWorld was designed to be more realistic than the typical fantasy roleplay setting, and is more about people, their lives, their communities, and their societies than the average setting. But it's still full of fantasy fun, and includes elves, dwarves, goblins, monsters, and arcane and divine magic. I've got to tell you, HârnWorld really gets this balance right, and that's why it's one of my favorite fantasy RPG settings. The setting mostly focuses on the large island of Harn and its nearby smaller islands, together comprising an archipelago called the Harnic Isles. The large central island of Harn is about 3 times the size of Great Britain. There are several individual kingdoms within the large island of Harn. Now let's talk about Azadmere. It's one of the central kingdoms in Harn and is its major surviving dwarven nation. The kingdom is populated by both dwarves and humans, but it's ruled over by a dwarven dynasty. And finally, there's the new Kickstarter for a hardback printing of the Azadmere sourcebook. Still going at the time this video is being published, and we'll cover some of your options to get in on it while you still can. To pledge to the Azadmere Kickstarter, you can use the link in this video's description. This is an affiliate link, and RPG Rundown may receive a portion of pledges generated when you use it. HârnWorld was designed as a detailed, realistic, flexible, and system-neutral setting. It was inspired generally by Norman England, but it includes dwarves, elves, and orcs, and other fantastical creatures. It aims to balance realism and fantasy together into an immersive experience, rich with layers of detail and a feel of medieval authenticity. I've run a campaign in Harn myself, and I found it to have all the depth of information I love to have in a game. There's plenty of space to make it your own as a GM, but it provides an extremely thorough structure on which to build, beyond any other setting you'll find. It all began in 1983 with the release of the Harn Regional Module, a folio publication including information about the Harnic Isles. It also contained the first iteration of the Harn decks and a large color map of Harn. The second edition of HârnWorld came out in 1990. This revised and expanded edition included content covering the continent of Lithia. And the third edition was first published in 2014 and again in 2020. This edition expanded the artwork and content, and it featured colorized versions of the classic art from previous editions. Now, Harn has been described as low magic, but it's more accurate to call it magic rare. Magic exists, it can be wielded by characters, and it can be very powerful, but it's not so common that you'll come across it every place you go. And that's also true of the more strange and terrifying monsters. The scope of the setting is vast, spanning from the grand to the minute. Even the solar system is fully spelled out. The lands of HârnWorld are on a planet called Kythera, and that entire planet is mapped completely, with all kinds of details. For example, the structure of the plate tectonics. Even the constellations you'd see in Kythera's night sky. The setting is mostly focused on the Harnic Isles, though, and this is why the setting itself is called HârnWorld. Its history is very developed, from the mythic rumors of a forerunner race called the Earthmasters, then moving to the arrival of the elves, dwarves, humans, and others, and the development of all the kingdoms up until what is considered the present in the setting. Specifically, this is the year 720 TR in Harnic Reckoning. This present time is where everything in the books stops, because what happens now is up to the way you run your game. In other words, Harn's future is always your game's future. Harn is mapped in great detail in several ways, from a highly detailed poster map, to a cultural political map, and even a trade map. Each Harnic kingdom has its own sourcebook with maps and plenty of details about the culture, history, cities and towns, and the people of the kingdom. There are details such as the ruling house's coat of arms, fully mapped towns and cities, and in each place, lots of detail on individual NPCs, their interests, even their motivations. The core HârnWorld book gives an overview of the nations and peoples living and adventuring in the Harnic Isles, along with information on the basics of feudalism and manorial life, as well as all of Harn's history. It also contains information on weather, trade and guilds, religion, and more. There are two other main sections in this book: the Harndex, an encyclopedia of information about the setting, and a large section covering Lithia, the closest continent to the Harnic Isles. Once you've looked over the HârnWorld book, a good next step in getting ready to run a game is to buy one of the Kingdom books and begin your campaign there. The level of detail in these books is just what you need to get your character's story going. Now let's talk about the new hardback edition of the Azadmere book. This book is just one of several source books which cover each of the 7 kingdoms in the Harn setting. They have the right amount of detail for an entire campaign set in any one of these nations. Azadmere is the last remaining dwarven kingdom in Harn. I'm going to share several details about the setting, but know that this is all still just a taste of the material. There is so much more in this rich and detailed book to read and discover for yourself. Commonly called dwarves, the proper name for this species in Harn is Khuzdul. Their origin isn't completely known, though they are thought to have been brought to Harn through one of the mysterious artifacts called Godstones. This is in part because both Azadmere and an earlier dwarven kingdom, Karaz, were built near mountains containing those godstones. The Khuzdul themselves do not share this view, insisting that they were awakened from a supernatural slumber deep within the mountains by the god they worship, Siem. The Khuzdul migrated across Harn, eventually founding 2 kingdoms, Azadmere and Karaz. Early human settlers to Harn, called Yarin, got along with the elves and dwarves already living there. But a later wave of raiders from the continent of Lithia began attacking settlements on Harn. This culminated in a war that devastated the existing Harnic cultures. An alliance of Yaran humans, dwarves, and elves fought the invaders back, but at great cost. Eventually, they saw they could not sustain resistance against the Lithian settlers, and so elf, dwarf, and Yaran withdrew into their own kingdoms. The elves, or Sindarin, especially grew reclusive and would no longer aid the Khuzdul, prompting the beginning of a resentment for Sindarin by Khuzdul. After this, the Khuzdul kingdom of Karaz went into a slow decline and was eventually overrun by a warlord called Lothrim. Lothrim brought orcs to Harn, who were called Gargun. Survivors could not bear to live at the site of this devastation, and so they sealed Karaz and settled in Azadmere. Currently, the biggest threat to Azadmere is raids by the vicious orcs. The Kingdom of Azadmere is somewhat insular and protective of its valuable trade assets. Outsiders are only allowed in if they have been named Umrai, which means Khuzdul friend. The book contains a lot of information about Azadmere's economy, its exports and imports, seasons of trade, and more. There's also a fairly full list of the line of kings of Azadmere. The kingdom contains ruins from the troubled parts of its history, and those sites are detailed too. There's also rich information about Khuzdan customs, traditions, and even family life, including detail about their sustenance and their diet. Khuzdul have distinct forms of fashion and are lively practitioners of their arts. And as you might expect, Khuzdan arms and armor are among the very best in Harn. Khuzdul have their own system of law and a form of government called the King's Law. There's plenty of information, too, about the Yaran human culture in Azadmere, including their language, clothing, diet, religion, and much more. Within the Kingdom of Azadmere is its capital, Azadmere City. Like the kingdom itself, the city's culture is a hybrid of Khuzan and human cultures. Azadmere has inner and outer sections. The inner section is carved into a mountain, while the outer sprawls before it in a walled bailey. Both human and dwarf work in the outer city in crafting and trade, while the Khuzdul themselves live in the inner city. The Yaran humans live outside even the outer city walls in their own village called Taniz. The largest human settlement in the Kingdom of Azadmere, though, is Habe. The Khuzdul allowed the Yaran to settle here to provide fish and agricultural products through trade, as these are things Khuzdul do not take to and tend not to be interested in. As with the contents covering Azadmere City, there's plenty of detail about Habe's military forces, trade, tax, and culture. Regions of the city, its major personalities and institutions are all detailed, along with plenty of suggested adventure hooks. The city of Zerhun stands guard to the south approach to the kingdom, as well as watching over the major trade route called the Silver Way as it enters the kingdom. Zerhun is the second most important city in the Kingdom of Azadmere, and is the seat of the kingdom's crown prince. Zerhun is governed by a form of military law rather than the king's law, which the rest of the nation follows, and as with the other major locations covered in this book, the extensive military fortification at Zerhun is fully mapped and detailed. There's an entire section in the book on the mountain range where the kingdom is located, called the Sorkins. The long trade route, known as the Silver Way, is a fully fleshed out location of its own. The Silver Way is also the only road into the Kingdom of Azadmere and the major means of trade in precious metals and iron on Harn. Entire stretches of the Silver Way are extremely dangerous and pass through brigand and orc territory. It's also impassable due to weather from mid-autumn to late spring. The book details many of the Silver Way's major areas and their order of placement along the road, making a quest to trek the entire route in a caravan an exciting basis for a campaign. Individual adventure hooks are listed in this section too. The last section of the book covers a ruin along the Silver Way called the Guth Bridge. It's a fully fortified bridge with many levels and rooms. And as with everything else covered in this book, Guth Bridge is fully mapped, detailed, and rich with adventure possibility. Now, Columbia Games currently has a Kickstarter going for the hardback printing of the Azadmere sourcebook. Let's take a look at the pledge levels they offer. First, you can pledge $1 purely because you believe in the project and you want to contribute. You can also pledge $1 for the Tempting Teaser level, which offers 2 rewards, a PDF map of Harn and a free PDF copy of a sourcebook called Cities and Towns. Now, these rewards for the Tempting Teaser are also included in all of the rest of the pledge levels. For a $49 pledge, you get both the Azadmere hardback as well as the PDF version. And finally, for $299, you get 6 hardbacks: HârnWorld, the Kingdom of Azadmere, the Kingdom of Orbal, the Kingdom of Rethim, the Kingdom of Meldurin, and the Kingdom of Kaldor. Now, all of these pledge levels offer a host of add-ons for an additional pledge. For example, the Harn Manor PDF, 6 PDF adventure books, or even the Own the World PDF bundle, which includes every single Harn PDF currently available, which is over 200 books with over 4,500 pages of original content. For the hardback pledges, there's also an add-on to get an extra copy of the Azadmere hardcover for an additional pledge of $49. Thanks for watching this video about the Azadmere hardback Kickstarter from Columbia Games. And if you like this video, remember to use the link below to check out the Kickstarter. I'm Dave with the RPG Rundown, reminding you to like and subscribe, maybe even leave a comment below about what intrigues you most about this unique roleplay setting. And until next time, may all your 20s be natural.